Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going through 3 compositional and framing tips or techniques that you can incorporate in your photographs to get more balanced results. Now, all of these revolve around including people or incorporating people inside of your outdoor photography, or maybe not even people, maybe pets, dogs, and cats. Basically, the examples I have for you today include people and dogs, so that's why I mentioned dogs, but realistically it's mostly about including people in your photographs. But let's waste no time and get into it. First compositional or framing tip that I've got for you in this video is all about the position, orientation, and sort of head location of people in your photographs. So take this example here of Jess sat on this rock at the coast, and you'll notice her sitting position, her feet, her legs, even her eye line where her eyes would be looking in the photograph are all pointing to the left into where most of the space, negative space, in this case it's not that negative, but let's call it negative space for the sake of the video. She is positioned looking that way and her body is also orientated that way. If I was to flip her, I think it goes without saying that it would look a bit silly. Why is she kind of the wrong way around and looking out of that side of the image? Now, obviously, if you've got a person situated dead center in the frame, doesn't really matter which way they're looking or which way their body is orientated. They could be looking towards the lens, completely backwards, out to the left, out to the right. It doesn't matter because they're central. So either way, it's going to look fine. Now let's pull up this image, and this was actually an image I shot in a behind the scenes 15 photos, 1 location series on my channel. I shot this in real time with the GoPro on and all of that good stuff. And I spoke about it a little bit in that video, and that's what inspired me to then make this video. But as you can see, the guy here, he's looking through his binoculars and he's looking out at the coast. Now he's on the right side of the frame looking out in this direction, and there's way less space over on the right hand side than there is on the left hand side. So if we flip this guy to be looking back in the other direction, that would be fantastic, and he would be looking in a direction that's most visually pleasing for the image. Alternatively, if the guy and the bench were flipped, and obviously I couldn't do this because the bench is where the bench is and I can't change where the bench is. But if the guy was on the other side of the bench and I'd taken a few steps to the left in order to frame them up centrally again, it would have made a lot more sense, been way more balanced and way more pleasing to look at. Obviously, if you're setting up photos with your friend or you've gone on a shoot with somebody, you can obviously position them where you want to best get the photograph. So this is when this is going to pay off the most. But having said that, if you do see a scene like this one and you know that it's not going to be perfect, the guy's kind of in the wrong position, still take the photograph anyway, because you can do lots in post with cropping and all that good stuff to still salvage something out of it. Or maybe you even kind of like the disorientation. As you know, I mentioned dogs at the start of this video, so I've got a couple of examples with Lupin, my dog, in the frame here. So you can see he is situated to the left, and we've got most of the rest of the space on the frame, in the frame, that doesn't contain Lupin on the right hand side. So his head, his eye line, and his body is all positioned pointing towards that side of the frame. His nose and his eyes are all situated in that direction in the image. If I flip him around like this, he's looking out of the frame and it all becomes a bit strange and unbalanced and cramped. It feels cramped, that's how it feels. So something major to look out for that can really improve your photographs. It might seem silly if you already know all this and you're already doing it, but I see it loads. I see it all the time, photographs of people looking in the wrong direction, the heads looking out of the frame or in the frame. And it's a really small thing to just reposition the person that you're photographing, reposition yourself if you're the person in the photograph, and balance those images out and get much more pleasing results. Okay, so tip number 2 and tip number 3 for this video kind of merge together and work well together, so I'm going to rattle through them both as kind of one big tip, but they are 2 tips. Take a shot for how many times I say tips in this video. First of all, let's talk about using people in order to showcase scale in photographs. So you may see a lot, you know, a silhouetted figure or a person stood in the frame somewhere to showcase the scale of a big outdoor environment. Much like this photograph here, actually took this way back in, I want to say 2017, very old photograph. But as you can see where I am stood, it's really nicely showcasing the scale of the place. I'm not saying this is a perfect photograph or I'm positioned perfectly, but it is doing the job of showcasing the scale of the place. My identity is not present, shall we say, so it doesn't make it too much about the person and their face and their features and their identity, but it does showcase the person in that environment, how steep that cliff is, the rolling hills in the background with that cloud inversion coming in, and it all comes together very nicely. But very, very often I see people trying to achieve this look, this perception of scale, and they've positioned the person way, way, way too close to the camera. And in doing so, it then makes the photograph about the person and not scale. So to find an example of this, I actually Googled man stood on the edge of a cliff and I found this image here on freepic.com, whatever that is. This image is, I'm 99.9% sure, is created by AI because the guy's face is mangled and it looks like he's got two different types of shoes on. But anyway, it does show, regardless of it being AI, it does show what I'm saying, because this is the exact photograph that I see all the time. It just becomes about the person, doesn't it? All I'm thinking when I look at this photograph is, this guy stood on a rock and he's got beige chinos on and a blue jumper. And I don't really even look down there into the distance and think about the scale, because the camera orientation, in this case there was no camera involved, but if it was a real photograph, the camera orientation is completely off to show scale. That image is very much about the person, the type of thing you'd see as a Facebook display photo to say, look at me, I went and climbed this place. So let's take a look at this image here of Jess stood on the rock in front of the waterfall. This is in the Faroe Islands, Fossa waterfall. This image, for me personally, you can disagree, obviously, it's all open for debate. I think this shows the scale of that water falling down the cliff edge really, really well. And this is all down to the fact that Jess is positioned in that lower third of the frame. It makes her feel quite small, even though she's not that far away. You can't see her identity too much. You can't see too much of her facial features. You can see that her eyes are closed and she's sort of relaxed and chilling out. But what I see far too often, if this was a photograph that I came across, is maybe someone was positioned here on the rock and too close to the camera. Also the fact that she's been positioned by me in a location that the water's falling down onto the top of her to almost show the power of that water coming down, for me again adds to that scale. Of course, again, it's all subjective. You might think that doesn't show scale at all, but I think it does. So, you know. So the last talking point for this video then is basically the opposite of the one we just spoke about, and it's taking photos outdoors with people where you want the photograph to be about the person and the environment that they're in. So most of the subject and most of the thought when you look at the image is going to be about the person. So let's bring up this image here. Obviously this is, I guess this is more of a portrait-y shot, but given it's outdoors and it's not necessarily been too set up or too staged or anything like that, it's still somewhat of an outdoorsy, explory, landscapey shot. But as you can see, Jess there is taking up the majority of the frame. Again, going back to point number one, she's in the middle, so it doesn't really matter which way her body was orientated or which way her head was going. And in this image, you can clearly see her identity. You can see her eyes, her nose, her mouth, her hair, all of the facial features. Well, I guess she's got a woolly hat on, which covers quite a bit of it, but this is very much about the person. The background's also blurred out, so you don't get too much insight to the environment. It's very much a photograph about the person. She's not too far away, she's not too far at the edge of the frame, and she's not too close to the frame either. I would say the same about this image, but less about the identity of the person, and the image is more about the person actually going through a walk and walking down that path. That's what this image is about. It's not about showing the scale of the place. If I wanted to show the scale of the place in this photograph, I would have positioned Jess much further down the path, and I would have reframed it probably lower and took some different angles in order to show off how tall the trees are, or anything like that in the frame that I wanted to do justice to when it came to scale. Now, there are times where you can somewhat do both to some degree, so I'm going to throw this photo up here, and for me this sways more to be about the person than the location, but the location helps to tell the story of the person. So Jess's hair is flicking up here in the wind, which is where I think the location adds, because it tells you that wherever she stood there up there, it must have been windy, her hair's flying around. But she's so close to the front of the frame, or the camera should I say, that it very much becomes about the person first, and then you can say, oh, look where they stood, look at that water down there, look at the mountains in the distance. If I wanted to show scale at this particular time, as well as this photograph, I would have gone way further back with my camera, tried to make sure Jess was quite small in the frame, that the mountains and the sky and the water down there was doing pretty much all the heavy lifting, and then Jess was just a small little element or figure in the frame where her identity was not necessarily on show at all, but it's just a little element in there to show the vastness of the landscape. With all that being said, hopefully I made sense throughout this video. I am filming this one completely off the top of my dome without any notes or anything, so hopefully I did a good job of explaining it. But that's going to be it from me in this one. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to link a video here for you to watch next, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.